The Thompson Mansion was known throughout Chicago as a symbol of power and luxury. Its vast, meticulously maintained gardens were worthy of a postcard. However, for William Thompson, CEO of one of the largest business conglomerates in the country, that space felt more like a gilded prison than a home. On that particularly cold June night, William walked through the gardens as he often did. The sky, covered in dense clouds, seemed to mirror his state of mind. At 45, he had achieved everything money could buy, but something was always missing. A sense of emptiness that no bank account could fill. "Mr. William," called Margaret, the housekeeper who had worked for the family for over 2 decades. "Dr. Eleanor is on the phone. She said it's urgent." Eleanor Mitchell was more than his corporate lawyer. She was one of the few people he truly trusted. There was something in her voice on the phone that intrigued him. "William, I need to talk. In person. Can I come over today?" An hour later, Eleanor arrived at the mansion. Her brown eyes revealed a mix of concern and anticipation. "You won't believe what I found," she said, sitting down in the library. "Remember that merger process with the Montgomery Group? I found some inconsistencies in the documents." William felt his stomach churn. The merger with the Montgomery Group was the biggest deal of his career, worth billions. Any problem could be catastrophic. As Eleanor explained the details, a distant sound caught her attention. "Did you hear that?" he interrupted. "What?" "Sounds like crying." The two approached the library window that overlooked the main gate. The sound grew clearer as they moved through the garden. Near the outdoor trash bin, a small cardboard box caught William's attention. "My God!" exclaimed Eleanor upon seeing the contents of the box. A baby, who couldn't have been more than a few months old, was wrapped in a worn blanket. Her little green eyes were brimming with tears, but upon seeing the adults' faces, she stopped crying for a moment. William, who always prided himself on his ability to make rational and calculated decisions, felt something different at that moment. Without a second thought, he picked up the baby in his arms. The tiny creature clung to his shirt with surprising strength for someone so small. "We need to call the authorities," said Eleanor, already reaching for her phone. "Wait," William requested, still mesmerized by the baby. "It's too cold, let's take her inside first." In the mansion, Margaret quickly prepared warm milk and brought some clean towels. The baby, now warm and fed, slept peacefully in Eleanor's arms, who displayed a surprising naturalness in handling children. "You have a gift," William observed. Eleanor smiled somewhat melancholically. "I always wanted to have children, but my career, you know how it is." That night would forever change the lives of the 3 of them. As they watched the baby sleep, an invisible connection began to form. Eleanor, who had always put her career first, felt her heart melt with every little movement of the child. William, on the other hand, experienced a completely new sensation, the feeling of being needed not for his money or power, but simply for being there. "What are we going to do?" Eleanor asked after a few hours. "For now, she stays," William replied, with a certainty that surprised even himself. "Tomorrow we'll figure out the next steps." That night, as the city slept, 3 destinies became irreversibly intertwined. The Thompson Mansion, once a monument to solitude, began to transform into something different. The cry of a baby, which, under other circumstances, might have been considered a nuisance, sounded like music to its new guardians. The merger with the Montgomery Group, which just hours earlier had seemed like William's greatest concern, now felt insignificant in the face of the little being sleeping in the makeshift nursery. Eleanor, who had come to deliver business news, found something far more valuable, a chance to fulfill a long-held dream. The days that followed were a roller coaster of emotions and adjustments in the Thompson Mansion. Eleanor practically moved in, temporarily abandoning her luxurious apartment in Beverly Hills. With Margaret's help, they transformed one of the guest rooms into a proper nursery, complete with a crib, changing table, and a nursing chair. "I think we should name her Sophia," Eleanor suggested one morning as she cradled the little one. "It means wisdom in Greek. And look how she observes us. It seems like she understands everything." William, who was working on his laptop in the same room, looked up and smiled. It was true. The baby had a piercing gaze as if she could see right through people. Sophia Thompson, he tried out the name. It suits her. Sophia's presence brought profound changes to the routine of the mansion. William, who used to spend entire days at the office, now made a point of coming home earlier. Video conference meetings often took place in his library, where he could hear the little one's laughter echoing through the halls. Eleanor, in turn, discovered a new version of herself. The tough lawyer, feared in courtrooms, now sang lullabies and made funny faces to elicit giggles from the baby. Her clients began to notice the change in her demeanor, though she kept the reason for her transformation a secret. "We need to sort out her situation," Eleanor commented one night after Sophia had fallen asleep. "We can't go on like this indefinitely." William sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "I know, but what if someone comes forward to claim custody? What if—" "Shh," Eleanor interrupted him, placing a finger on his lips. "Let's tackle one problem at a time. First, we'll register her temporarily. Then we'll think about the rest." The process of formalizing the temporary custody was made easier by the influence of both, but not without raising suspicions. Beatrice Montgomery, heiress to the business group with whom William was negotiating a merger, showed particular interest in the case during a business dinner. "So the mighty William Thompson suddenly became a father," she teased, swirling her wineglass. "What a peculiar story." The tone of her voice caused an inexplicable discomfort in William. There was something in her gaze that unsettled him, as if she knew something he didn't. But at that moment, his greater concern was for Eleanor, who was at home with Sophia, battling a severe flu. "Life surprises us, Beatrice," he replied diplomatically. "Sometimes the best things happen unplanned." When he returned home that night, William found Eleanor asleep in the armchair in Sophia's room, a storybook on her lap. The baby was sleeping peacefully in her crib, clutching a small stuffed teddy bear. The scene made him smile, but it also brought a pang of worry. Eleanor had been showing signs of increasing fatigue. Her coughing fits persisted, and she stubbornly refused to see a doctor, claiming she didn't have the time. William sensed that something wasn't right, but Eleanor always changed the subject whenever he brought it up. "You need to take care of yourself," he insisted, gently waking her. "Sophia needs you strong and healthy." Eleanor opened her eyes slowly, smiling when she saw him. "I'm just a little tired. Tomorrow I'll be better." But tomorrow brought more worries. During an important meeting with the executives of the Montgomery Group, William received an urgent call from Margaret. Eleanor had fainted while playing with Sophia in the garden. "The ambulance is already on its way," informed the housekeeper, her voice trembling. "The girl is fine, just scared. But Dr. Eleanor—" William left the meeting immediately, ignoring the surprised looks from those present. On the way home, 1,000 thoughts raced through his mind. The possibility of losing Eleanor, who had become much more than a work partner, terrified him. And Sophia, who had already formed a deep attachment to her, how would she cope? When he arrived home, he found the doctor examining Eleanor, who had already regained consciousness. Sophia was in Margaret's lap, her little green eyes teary, as if she understood the gravity of the situation. The preliminary diagnosis was not encouraging. Eleanor would need more detailed tests and urgently. Chicago General Hospital had never seemed so intimidating to William as it did that morning. Sitting in the waiting room of Dr. Paul Mitchell's office, a specialist in oncology, he tried to maintain his composure while awaiting the results of Eleanor's tests. Sophia, now almost a year old, played distractedly with her colorful blocks on the children's rug in the reception area. "Mr. Thompson," called the secretary, "the doctor will see you now." Eleanor was already in the room, seated across from the doctor's desk. Her usually determined face showed a vulnerability that William had rarely witnessed. Margaret entered shortly after to stay with Sophia, allowing them to focus on the consultation. "The tests revealed a complex condition," began Dr. Paul, adjusting his glasses as he looked at the images on the computer. "But we have treatment options. It will be a challenging journey, but with the right therapies." The doctor's voice seemed distant as Eleanor and William absorbed the news. An aggressive tumor, but with chances of treatment. The word cancer hung in the air like a heavy cloud, even though no one had directly uttered it. How long will the treatment take? Asked Eleanor, her voice steady as if negotiating a contract. Initially, we anticipate a 6-month cycle. After that, we'll reassess the body's response, replied the doctor. It will be necessary to significantly reduce your workload. Outside the office, Sophia ran into Eleanor's arms as soon as she saw her. It was as if the little one sensed that her mother needed comfort. Eleanor held her tightly, breathing in the soft scent of her light brown hair. "We'll get through this together, my love," she whispered, more to herself than to the child. In the weeks that followed, the routine at the mansion adapted to the new reality. William rearranged his commitments to be more present, delegating responsibilities at the company. Eleanor, reluctant at first, agreed to reduce her involvement in legal cases, focusing only on the most urgent matters she could handle from home. One afternoon, as Eleanor rested after a chemotherapy session, William found Sophia in her room, trying to climb onto the dresser. As he reached for her, he noticed something shiny falling from one of the drawers, a golden chain with a peculiar pendant. "Where did this come from?" he murmured, examining the object. The symbol on the pendant seemed familiar, but he couldn't place where he had seen it before. "It was the only valuable thing she had with her that night," said Margaret, who had entered the room quietly. "I kept it thinking it might be important someday." William stored the chain in his personal safe, making a mental note to investigate its origin later. At that moment, his priority was elsewhere. Eleanor had developed a new complication and would need to be hospitalized. "Promise you'll record it," Eleanor asked, adjusting herself in the hospital bed. In her hands, a small digital recorder. "I want Sophia to have this for the future." William nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. Eleanor began to sing a lullaby, her voice soft and melodic, though a bit weaker than usual. It was the same song she sang to Sophia every night. At home, Sophia began to show signs of restlessness due to Eleanor's prolonged absence. She would wake up at night calling for her, and spent long periods hugging the stuffed bear Eleanor had given her. "Mama," she would ask repeatedly, looking at the door every time someone entered. The situation became even more complicated when Beatrice Montgomery unexpectedly showed up at the mansion, claiming she needed to discuss urgent matters regarding the merger. Her gaze lingered on Sophia, who was playing in the garden. "What an interesting coincidence," she remarked, watching the little girl. "She reminds me of someone." William felt a shiver run down his spine. There was something in Beatrice's tone that deeply unsettled him. Before he could question her, his phone rang. It was the hospital. "Come quickly," said the nurse. "Dr. Eleanor is asking for you." At that moment, William found himself torn between two worlds that threatened to collapse: the mysterious past of Sophia, which seemed to want to emerge through Beatrice's cryptic words, and the fragile present of Eleanor, who was battling an invisible enemy in the hospital. The private hospital room was quiet, except for the constant beeping of the monitors. Eleanor was asleep, exhausted after yet another treatment session. William held her hand, observing how fragile she looked against the white sheets. Sophia, sitting on the sofa near the window, was drawing intently, occasionally stopping to glance toward the bed. "Daddy," called Sophia, now almost 2 years old, her childish voice breaking the silence. "Mama better?" William picked up the little girl, feeling his heart tighten. How could he explain the complexity of the situation to such a young child? "Mommy is fighting to get better, Princess. She's very strong, you know." Eleanor slowly opened her eyes, smiling as she saw the two of them. "My favorite people," she murmured, her voice hoarse. "Come closer." Sophia immediately reached out, her little arms to Eleanor, who hugged her with all the strength she could muster. William watched the scene with a mix of love and concern. It was then that he noticed an envelope partially hidden under Eleanor's pillow. "What's this?" he asked, picking up the envelope. Eleanor hesitated for a moment. "It's some instructions for the future. There's also a letter for Sophia for when she's older. Promise me you'll keep it safe." "Eleanor, don't talk like that. You're going to—" "William," she interrupted him gently. "We need to be realistic. Sophia needs to know how much she was loved, even if I'm not here to tell her in person." At that moment, a nurse came in to perform the routine procedures, and Margaret arrived to take Sophia home. The little girl protested, not wanting to leave Eleanor, but eventually gave in after receiving one more hug and the promise to return the next day. Alone with Eleanor, William finally found the courage to share his discovery about the golden chain. "I found something that was with Sophia that night," he said, showing her the photo of the pendant on his phone. "There's a strange symbol. It looks like some kind of family crest." Eleanor examined the image carefully. "This reminds me of something. Wasn't this the same symbol we saw in the old Montgomery family documents during the merger due diligence?" The revelation hit William like a bolt of lightning. Now he understood why the symbol seemed familiar. It also explained Beatrice Montgomery's suspicious interest in Sophia. But what could the connection be? Why would a child with a Montgomery family heirloom be abandoned right at his doorstep? "I need to look into this," William decided. "I'll hire someone discreet, someone I can trust." "Be careful," Eleanor warned, her voice filled with concern. "The Montgomerys are powerful and have connections everywhere. If Sophia really has some link to them—" A coughing fit interrupted her words. William quickly offered her water, his mind torn between immediate concern for Eleanor and the implications of this discovery. Days later, while Eleanor underwent more tests, William secretly met with George Sanders, a private investigator recommended by an old friend. The meeting took place at a discreet cafe in downtown Chicago. "I need absolute discretion," William emphasized, handing over an envelope with the initial information. "Any leak could put a child at risk." George examined the material with professional interest. "Interesting. This symbol is very specific. It will make tracking easier. But I must warn you, meddling with traditional families can reveal secrets we might prefer not to know." Meanwhile, at the mansion, Sophia began to exhibit intriguing behavior. During an afternoon of play, Margaret found her arranging her dolls in a specific formation, murmuring words that seemed like an old song. "Where did you learn that song, child?" asked Margaret, surprised to recognize an ancient lullaby from the region where the Montgomery family had its origins. Sophia simply smiled, continuing her play. It was as if some distant memory predating her arrival at the mansion was naturally surfacing. At the hospital, Eleanor used her moments of clarity to record memories in a journal. "So that Sophia never forgets," she explained when William questioned her. Her words, though increasingly difficult to write, flowed with love and wisdom. One afternoon, while casually flipping through a magazine in Eleanor's room, William came across an article about the history of the most influential families in Chicago. The youthful face of Beatrice Montgomery next to her younger sister, supposedly missing years ago, caught his attention. The resemblance between the missing sister and Sophia was striking. The magazine article wouldn't leave William's mind. Claire Montgomery, Beatrice's younger sister, had mysteriously disappeared after an intense family conflict, right around the time Sophia was found. The dates coincided in a disturbing way. "I need to show you something," William said to Eleanor one afternoon when she was more alert. He pulled the magazine from his folder and showed her the photo. Eleanor, though weakened by her treatment, widened her eyes at the image. "My God, William, the resemblance is incredible. Those same green eyes, the shape of the face." Eleanor paused to catch her breath. "But if Sophia is really Claire, Montgomery's daughter, why was she abandoned, and why on your doorstep?" Before they could continue the conversation, George Sanders, the investigator, sent an urgent message. "Important discoveries. We need to talk in person. Today." William hesitated to leave Eleanor, but she insisted. "Go. We need to know the truth for Sophia." The meeting with George took place at a reserved restaurant in Lincoln Park. The investigator seemed agitated, something unusual for his normally composed demeanor. "What you discovered about Claire Montgomery was just the tip of the iceberg," he began, lowering his voice. "She didn't just disappear, she fled, and there was a very strong reason for it." George explained that Claire had uncovered compromising documents about the family's shady business dealings. When she confronted her father and sister Beatrice, she was threatened. She was pregnant at the time, George revealed. According to my sources, the father of the child was an executive who opposed the Montgomerys' methods. He had an accident soon after. William felt a chill. The pieces were starting to come together. Claire had likely left Sophia at his doorstep because she knew he was powerful enough to protect her. "There's more," George continued. "Claire isn't... well, she's somewhere in Europe. I managed to trace some bank movements. She's still alive, but under a different identity." The revelation was both a relief and a new source of worry. Sophia had a living biological mother somewhere who had sacrificed herself to protect her. Upon returning to the hospital, William encountered a scene that left him even more emotional. Eleanor was sitting on the bed, holding Sophia in her lap, teaching her how to make origami. The little girl laughed with each new shape they managed to create together. "Look, Daddy," exclaimed Sophia, holding up a small paper crane. "Mummy said it brings good luck." Eleanor smiled, though her eyes showed exhaustion. "I'm teaching her that sometimes we need to fold and unfold many times to get the perfect shape. Just like life, right?" William sat down beside them, feeling the weight of the discoveries he had just made. How could he tell Eleanor? How could he protect Sophia without depriving her of knowing her origins? That night, after putting Sophia to bed, William found Eleanor writing in her diary. She seemed especially determined. "You know what worries me the most?" she said, closing the notebook. "It's not just the health issue, it's Sophia. If something happens to me, and now with these discoveries about the Montgomerys, William, promise me you'll protect her. Don't let them use her as a pawn in power games." "Eleanor, no, listen to me," she continued, her voice growing stronger. "That girl is more than just our daughter now. She represents hope, love, redemption. We can't let them corrupt her with revenge and greed." She was interrupted by a nurse who came in to administer the nighttime medication. As Eleanor drifted off to sleep, William stayed by her side, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts. At the mansion, Margaret was organizing some things in Sophia's room when she found another intriguing detail. A small sketchbook where the girl had repeatedly doodled a symbol very similar to that of the chain, even though she had never seen it before. "What a beautiful drawing, sweetheart," Margaret commented. "Where did you see this?" Sophia, drowsy in her bed, replied with the typical innocence of children. "In my dream, Grandma was singing this song and showing me this drawing." William, when informed by Margaret about the incident, felt his concern grow. It was as if Sophia's past was gradually emerging through unconscious memories, small signs that could no longer be ignored. The news arrived on a rainy Sunday. Eleanor's treatment was no longer having the expected effect. Dr. Paul Mitchell, with his usual calmness, explained that they would need to try a more aggressive approach. "The new protocol is experimental," he explained, adjusting his glasses, "but we've had good results in similar cases." Eleanor listened to everything with surprising calm, as if she had already expected this. William, by her side, tried to process the information while watching Sophia play with her building blocks in the corner of the consultation room. "How long do we have to decide?" asked Eleanor, her voice steady. "Ideally, we should start this week," replied the doctor. "Every day counts now." As they left the office, they encountered Beatrice Montgomery in the hospital lobby. It wasn't a coincidence. She had her sources everywhere. Her gaze alternated between Sophia and Eleanor, as if assessing the situation. "What a surprise to find you here," she said, her honeyed voice hiding a note of tension. "Little Sophia is looking more and more like, well, she's growing up beautifully." William instinctively positioned himself between Beatrice and the girl. Eleanor, though weakened, straightened up in her wheelchair, her eyes flashing with a protective gleam. "We need to talk, William," Beatrice continued, "about the merger, of course, and other pending matters." "Now is not the time," he replied, curtly. "Oh, but it soon will be," she retorted, an enigmatic smile on her lips. "Very soon." That night, after putting Sophia to bed, William and Eleanor discussed the situation in her room. The atmosphere was heavy with unspoken concerns. "They know," said Eleanor, her voice almost a whisper. "The Montgomerys know about Sophia. And now, with my condition, they won't take her from us," William asserted, holding Eleanor's hand. "I will never allow it." William, we need to be practical. Eleanor took a deep breath, gathering strength. If something happens to me, you'll need legal protection. We must expedite the adoption process. The next day, while Eleanor began her new treatment, William met with his legal team. The process would be complex, especially considering the mysterious circumstances of Sophia's appearance. "Mr. Thompson," his assistant called, interrupting the meeting. "George Sanders is on the line. He says it's urgent." The investigator had made a crucial discovery. He found records of a private clinic where Claire Montgomery had given birth. More importantly, there was a document signed by her, a statement kept with a trusted lawyer. "She planned it all," explained George. "She left specific instructions regarding the custody of the child in case something happened to her. And you know what's most interesting? Your name was there, Mr. Thompson. Claire specifically chose you as the guardian." The revelation struck William like a bolt of lightning. Claire hadn't just entrusted Sophia to him out of desperation. There was a plan, a conscious choice. But why? What was his connection to all of this? Meanwhile, at the hospital, Eleanor took advantage of a moment of clarity to record another message for Sophia. Her voice, though weak, carried all the love she felt. "My little one," she said into the recorder, "by the time you hear this, you might be old enough to understand that family isn't just about blood. It's about choices, about unconditional love." She was interrupted by an unexpected visitor, Amanda Turner, a former employee of the Montgomery Group, who had mysteriously resigned years ago. She seemed nervous, constantly looking over her shoulder. "I came because I needed to see it with my own eyes," she said, glancing at the photo of Sophia on the bedside table. "You need to know the truth about Claire Montgomery. I was there when it all happened." Eleanor sat up in bed, ignoring the pain the movement caused. "Please, go on." "Claire discovered something terrible about the family, something involving her father and Beatrice. Something big enough to destroy not just the Montgomerys, but several other powerful families. When they found out she was pregnant, a noise in the hallway made her stop speaking. Amanda turned pale, quickly hiding an envelope in Eleanor's bag. "I can't stay any longer. But everything you need to know is here. Please protect that girl. She's more important than you realize." The envelope Amanda left contained documents that changed everything. Eleanor, exhausted from her treatment, couldn't stop reading. There were records, old photos, newspaper clippings, and most importantly, a handwritten letter from Claire Montgomery. "William needs to see this," Eleanor murmured, her hands trembling as she held the papers. The nurse had just left after administering her nightly medication, and the silence of the room was broken only by the soft beeping of the monitors. At the mansion, Sophia was playing in the garden under Margaret's watchful eye, while William was in a tense video conference with the Montgomery Group's board. Beatrice dominated the meeting, pushing for decisions that clearly only benefited her family. "The terms of the merger need to be revisited," Beatrice insisted, her voice carrying an authority that now sounded more like a threat. "Considering certain personal circumstances that could affect the stability of the companies," William remained firm, years of negotiation experience allowing him to mask his concern. "Any changes need to benefit both parties, Beatrice. You know that." The meeting was interrupted by an urgent call from the hospital. Eleanor was agitated, insisting on speaking with him immediately. 15 minutes later, William entered the hospital room, finding Eleanor sitting on the bed, more alert than she had been in days. "Read this," she said, handing him Claire's letter. "Now everything makes sense." The letter revealed a web of events spanning decades. Claire had discovered that her father, Augustus Montgomery, along with Beatrice, had built the family empire through questionable practices. But what truly horrified her was uncovering plans to use even more aggressive methods to eliminate competitors. "She chose you, William," Eleanor explained, her voice gaining strength with the urgency of the revelation. "Claire knew you were the only businessman powerful enough to stand up to her family, but too ethical to be corrupted by them." William continued reading, each word unveiling more details about Claire's meticulous plan. She had documented everything, created copies and scattered evidence in safe places. Sophia wasn't just her daughter, she was also her guarantee that the truth would one day come to light. "There's more," Eleanor continued, picking up another document. Claire left a power of attorney, signed before she left. She appointed you as Sophia's legal guardian if anything happened to her. That's why Beatrice can't simply take the girl. Legally, you have custody. A sound at the door interrupted them. It was Sophia, arriving for her daily visit with Margaret. The little girl ran to the bed, her green eyes so much like Claire's, shining with joy at the sight of Eleanor. "Mommy, look what I made," she exclaimed, holding up a colorful drawing. It was a family. Her, William, Eleanor, and curiously, another female figure in the background, almost like a protective shadow. Eleanor and William exchanged meaningful glances. It was as if, unconsciously, Sophia could sense the presence of her biological mother, a connection that transcended distance and time. "It's beautiful, my love," said Eleanor, hugging the girl. "You know what else is beautiful? How much you are loved, by all of us." That night, after Sophia fell asleep on the couch in the hospital room, William and Eleanor discussed the next steps. Eleanor's new treatment was particularly difficult, and she insisted on making sure everything was arranged to protect Sophia. "We need to find Claire," said William. "She needs to know her daughter is safe, that her plan worked." "And we need to prepare," added Eleanor, her voice showing exhaustion. "Beatrice won't give up easily when she finds out we know everything. Their empire could crumble if this information goes public." A movement in the hallway caught their attention. For a moment, they saw a familiar female silhouette. Could it be Amanda again? But when William went to check, there was no one there. Back at the mansion, Margaret found Sophia sitting on her bed, playing with her dolls and softly humming a melody that made her heart ache. It was the same lullaby Claire used to sing as a child, an old Montgomery family tradition that few knew about. "Where did you learn that song, child?" asked Margaret, intrigued. "The lady in my dream sings it to me," Sophia replied simply. "She has eyes just like mine." The response from George Sanders came through an encrypted email. He had located Claire Montgomery. After years of living under a false identity in Portugal, she had finally left traces that the investigator was able to follow. Even more surprising, she was returning to the United States. William read and reread the message several times seated in his library. The morning sun filtered through the curtains, creating dancing shadows over the documents scattered on his desk. Sophia played on the nearby rug, assembling a puzzle with the typical concentration of a child her age. "Daddy, look, I finished!" she exclaimed, proud of her accomplishment. The puzzle formed the image of a family of birds in their nest. William smiled, but his smile concealed worry. How could he explain to a 4-year-old that her story was more complex than she could imagine? How could he preserve her innocence while such important truths needed to come to light? At the hospital, Eleanor continued her fight. The new treatment was extremely exhausting, but she refused to show weakness. Her determination had a clear purpose. She wanted to be strong enough to protect Sophia when the storm finally arrived. "Did you manage to contact her?" Eleanor asked, adjusting herself in the hospital bed, as William showed her the latest findings. "George managed to get a message through. She wants to meet us, Eleanor. She wants to meet Sophia, but she's afraid of the consequences." Eleanor held William's hand with surprising strength. "We need to prepare Sophia. She's sensitive. She perceives more than we realize. Those songs she sings, the drawings she makes, they're not a coincidence." The conversation was interrupted by the abrupt entrance of Beatrice Montgomery. Her usually controlled face showed barely contained anger. "So it's true," she said, closing the door behind her. "My sister is coming back. Do you think you can destroy everything our family has built?" "Beatrice," Eleanor responded, her voice calm but firm. "The only destruction here was caused by your own actions. Sophia deserves to know her history." "That child is a Montgomery," Beatrice hissed. "She belongs to our family." "She belongs to herself," William retorted, stepping between Beatrice and Eleanor's bed. "And she has the right to know both Claire and her story." The confrontation was interrupted by the sound of children's laughter coming from the hallway. Sophia arrived for her daily visit, accompanied by Margaret. Upon seeing Beatrice, the girl stopped abruptly, clinging to the housekeeper's skirt. The moment was surreal. Beatrice stared at her niece, her face softening for an instant as she recognized the unmistakable features of Claire. Sophia, in turn, showed an unexpected reaction. "I know you," the girl said, her voice small but confident. "You're in the photo with the girl of my dreams." The silence that followed was deafening. Beatrice looked as if she had seen a ghost, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched her designer handbag. "This isn't over," she murmured, before hurrying out of the room. That night, as Sophia slept on the hospital room couch, Eleanor recorded another message in her audio diary. "My dear," her voice choked with emotion, "there are so many people who love you, so many stories intertwined in your life. You are the center of a love so vast that it transcends barriers, that overcomes distances." William stood by the hospital window, his reflection blending with the city lights. George had sent more details. Claire would arrive in 2 days. The meeting was set to take place in a safe location, far from the eyes of the Montgomerys. On the other side of the city, in her luxurious penthouse, Beatrice stared at an old photo. Her and Claire, still teenagers, smiling at the camera. Her hands shook as she poured herself another glass of whiskey. The empire her family had built was under threat. But for the first time in years, something else troubled her. Sophia's gaze, so similar to her sister's, had stirred memories she had fought to bury. The chosen location for the meeting was a countryside house on the outskirts of Chicago, a private property of William's that few knew about. The day dawned with a gentle mist covering the well-kept gardens, as if nature itself wanted to create a veil of protection for the moment. Eleanor had insisted on being present, despite the doctor's recommendations to the contrary. "I can't miss this," she argued with Dr. Paul, who finally relented on the condition that a nurse would accompany the family. Sophia, wearing her favorite blue floral dress, played in the garden under Margaret's watchful eye. The girl seemed to sense that something important was about to happen. She was quieter than usual, occasionally glancing toward the property's gate. "The car is arriving," announced George, who was keeping a discreet watch at the entrance. William felt his heart race. Eleanor, seated in her wheelchair on the porch, squeezed her hand in silent support. The vehicle stopped, and from it emerged an elegant woman with brown hair and green eyes identical to Sophia's. Claire Montgomery had changed over the years. Her face bore marks of worry, but it retained a serene beauty that time had failed to erase. Her eyes immediately found Sophia in the garden. The girl had stopped playing and was staring intently at the newcomer. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. "Sophia," William called softly. "Come here, my love." The girl ran to him, but her eyes never left Claire. "Daddy," she whispered, "it's the lady from my dreams." Claire covered her mouth with her hands, silent tears streaming down her face. Eleanor, watching the scene, also wept, though she maintained an encouraging smile. "Hi, Sophia," said Claire, her voice trembling slightly. I dreamed of you too." The girl, surprising everyone, let go of William's hand and walked over to Claire. "You sing that song, don't you? The one about the star and the sea?" Claire nodded, unable to contain her emotion. It was an old Montgomery family lullaby passed down through generations. "Your grandmother used to sing it to me when I was little, just like I sang it to you." "In the early days," Sophia finished, with wisdom beyond her years. The encounter was interrupted by an alert from George. Another car was approaching, at high speed. "It was Beatrice. She followed me," said Claire, visibly tensing. "Even after all these years." William quickly organized everyone to go inside the house. Eleanor, assisted by the nurse, was taken to the main room. Sophia, sensing the tension in the air, instinctively grabbed Claire's hand. Beatrice entered like a storm, her heels echoing on the wooden floor. She stopped abruptly upon seeing Claire and Sophia holding hands. "So this is how it ends?" she asked, her voice heavy with bitterness. "By destroying everything our family built?" "Our family was destroyed long before, Beatrice," Claire replied with surprising calm. "It was destroyed the moment they chose power over love, greed over justice." Sophia, noticing the sadness in Claire's voice, did something unexpected. She let go of Claire and walked over to Beatrice. "Why are you so sad?" she asked, looking up with her green eyes. The same eyes as Claire, the same eyes as the Montgomerys. The child's innocent gesture seemed to disarm Beatrice momentarily. She stared at her niece, seeing in her not just Claire but also herself when she was younger, before her father's ambitions poisoned everything. "I miss her too," Sophia continued, surprising everyone. "But now she's here, and you can stay too." Eleanor, watching the scene from her chair, realized something fundamental. Sophia, in her innocence, was doing what no adult had managed. She was building bridges where others only saw walls. Clara approached her sister, years of hurt and separation weighing heavily in the air between them. "You've always been more than that, Bea," she said, using Beatrice's childhood nickname. "We've always been more than Dad's plans." 6 months had passed since the meeting at the country house. The Thompson mansion, once silent, now buzzed with a different energy. The garden, redesigned with colorful flower beds, reflected the profound changes that had taken place during that time. Eleanor, after responding surprisingly well to the experimental treatment, was at home recovering. Her willpower had even impressed Dr. Paul, who attributed part of her improvement to Sophia's constant presence. "It's as if every smile from her gives me more energy," Eleanor confided to William one afternoon as they watched Sophia playing in the garden with Claire. The relationship between Claire and Sophia blossomed naturally, as if the years of separation had never existed. Claire had moved to a house near the mansion, allowing her daughter to maintain her routine with William and Eleanor while building their own moments together. "Mommy Eleanor," called Sophia, running toward the porch with a bouquet of wildflowers. "Mommy Claire taught me how to make flower crowns. Can we make one for you too?" Eleanor smiled, moved by the ease with which the girl handled having 2 mothers. "Of course, my love. Come, teach me." Claire approached, carrying more flowers. Her face, once marked by worry, now showed a serenity that only true reconciliation could bring. "I have news," she said, sitting close to Eleanor. "Beatrice has agreed to talk to the prosecutor. She's going to cooperate with the investigations into Dad's business dealings." The news surprised everyone. After the gathering at the country house, Beatrice had undergone a profound transformation. The love shown by Sophia had shattered something within her, allowing old wounds to begin healing. "She told me she doesn't want Sophia to grow up in a world built on lies," Claire continued. "It's the first time in years that I've recognized my true sister." William, who had been silently listening to the conversation, finally shared his own news. "The merger is cancelled. We're going to restructure both companies, create something new with more ethical foundations." The sound of the doorbell interrupted the conversation. It was Beatrice arriving for her weekly visit with her niece. Over the past few months, she had become a constant presence, though she still wrestled with her own demons. "Aunt Bea!" exclaimed Sophia, running to hug her. "You came just in time for the flower crown." Beatrice, who once prided herself on her corporate perfectionism, now let her niece place colorful flowers in her perfectly styled hair. "Are you turning me into a fairy, Sophia?" "No, into a princess, just like the story Mom Eleanor tells about the princess who learned to love." Margaret, who was watching the scene from the doorway, smiled with tears in her eyes. In her many years of service, she had never imagined seeing the mansion so full of life and love. That evening, while Sophia slept, the adults gathered in the library. Eleanor, growing stronger every day, shared her latest recording for Sophia. "My little one," her voice said on the recorder, "you've taught us that love knows no barriers, that family is so much more than blood. It's a choice, it's care, it's being present." Claire held Eleanor's hand, a gesture that would have been unthinkable months ago. "How you saved her as much as she saved you," she said softly. "We all saved each other," Eleanor replied. "Each of us needed healing, redemption. Sophia was just the catalyst." William watched the 2 women who had become the center of his daughter's universe. Because Sophia was his daughter regardless of documents or biology, the girl had transformed his life in ways he never thought possible. Beatrice, who had remained quiet until then, finally spoke. "Dad always said love was a weakness. How wrong he was. It was Claire's love for Sophia that preserved our family, even if in a different way than we imagined. The future still held challenges. There were legal battles to face, businesses to restructure, relationships to strengthen. But now they would face it all together, united by a force no business empire could buy. The unconditional love of a family built not by fate, but by choice. Sophia, in her childlike wisdom, had woven a web of love that connected unlikely people, healing old wounds and creating new paths. Her story was living proof that the strongest bonds are not always those determined by blood, but those forged by the heart. And so, under the roof of the Thompson mansion, a new story began to be written, no longer one of secrets and sorrows, but of reconciliation, healing, and above all, true love.